So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. As most of you know, my name is Carol Stern, and I work at the GLEN COVE Public Library as a librarian. Before we begin the talk, I just want to give you the next book, which will be March 11th at 2 o'clock. It's Lara Love Hardin, and the author, she wrote The Many Lives of Mama Love, another very good book. And that will be a virtual event also. So I'll send out a link to most people, but if you want to go on our webpage and sign up, go ahead. So Liz Nugent is an acclaimed Irish author known for her psychological thrillers. She was born in Ireland in 1967, and she has become renowned for her skill in creating complex, deeply flawed characters and building suspenseful narratives. Her debut novel, Unraveling Oliver, which was published in 2014, won the 2015 Crime Fiction Book of the Year at the Irish Book Awards. With a background in television and screenwriting, Liz brings a cinematic quality to her writing. She often explores themes of obsession, betrayal, and the darker aspect of human nature. Her books have been translated into multiple languages and have received international recognition. In 2024, Strange Sally Diamond was named the Book of the Moment by W.H. Smith's in the UK and Thriller of the Month by Waterstones. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat box and we will do our best to address them as soon as possible. To minimize the distractions, we'll mute everyone during this conversation. So personally, I don't know if I ever read a book with a character quite like Sally Diamond. I picked up this book and I just couldn't stop reading it. So you've won, as I said before, you've won numerous awards. Can you tell us what it's like to receive all these wonderful reviews and awards?
It's great, and like to get any kind of recognition is really encouraging because it means you feel validated in what you're doing and you feel like everything's good. So it's great in that way, but you can never really, this sounds terrible, but you can never really enjoy the success of the book that's won a prize. Because by the time that book has won a prize, you're halfway through the next book and you're terrified that that's going to be a flop. Like the one I'm writing now, I am absolutely terrified it's going to be awful. It's going to be dreadful. And I actually sent another writer friend of mine an email the other day. And I said, I think this book is going to kill me. I think this is going to be a disaster. I'm going to be found out after this book. And she sent me back an email that I'd sent her 3 years ago saying the exact same thing in almost the exact same words about Strange Sally Diamond. So as good and wonderful as it is to win the awards, it's very hard to actually enjoy them when you get them, because by the time you get them, or even, by the time your book hits #1 on the bestseller list, you've finished it. By the time it comes out, you're a year finished with it. So yeah, it's a bit, it's kind of a distraction from, in a way, like winning an award and going to an awards ceremony. It's a distraction from writing the book that you should be writing. So it's a very peculiar kind of career. There are highs and lows, but they kind of come at the same time.
I usually ask this at the end, but now that you mentioned it, what is your next book? When is it going to be published and what is it about?
I can't really tell you what it's about. It's going to be somewhere close to March 2026. And what is it about? It's about a young girl in Boston. It's partially set in Boston, who is involved in an incident in her teenage years that destroys the lives of everybody around her and herself. And it's partly set in Boston and it's partly set in Ireland. It starts when she's about 16 and it goes up to when she's about 25, and then we leap forward to 2025. So the last, third of the book is set in current times.
Well,
and we see the effects of all of these, the fallout of everything that's happened since the incident.
I bet it'll be just as good as this book. I can't wait to read it.
I hope so.
Actually, this was the first book I've read of yours. Is there another book that you liked as much as Sally Diamond that you could recommend if I want to read another one?
Oh, you're asking me to pick my favorite child. I think the easiest one to read is Lying in Wait, because it's very linear. There's no going backwards and forwards in time, really. It's straightforward. It starts in 1980 and it ends up in 1985. So there are some flashbacks, but it's not one of those books where I'm hopping time a lot. Little Cruelties does hop time, and it's one to read, but probably difficult, I would say, as an audiobook. So for a book or an ebook, um, Little Cruelties, but definitely Lying in Wait or Unraveling Oliver. Or Skin Deep if you can get your hands on it.
Okay, I will mark those down. So can you
Yeah.
tell us what inspired you to write Strange Sally Diamond? Was there a particular person or event or idea that sparked the initial concept for you?
Well, I'm kind of assuming that everybody has read To Kill a Mockingbird. I was fascinated by the character of Boo Radley, who never came out of his house and was a total recluse. And he's fond of the local children, and he leaves little treats in the hollow of the tree for them in the dark. So he does leave his house to do that. But and the only thing we know about him is we only know kind of rumors that are repeated about him because he doesn't speak. So we don't know what his story is. We know that he lives with his brother and his father. And the story or the rumor is that he bit his father in the leg when he was a child, and that's why he wasn't allowed out. Now we don't know if that's true, but then his father dies and he still doesn't leave the house, and his brother Nathan comes and goes from the house, has a regular job, is entirely normal, and yeah, so I was struck by a couple of things. First of all, two brothers brought up in the same house who live entirely different lives. And one of them is a total recluse, and we don't know why. And the other thing that fascinated me was why did he bite his father in the leg, if that was true, because we're only hearing it really from rumors. But yeah, Boo Radley, real name Arthur. I was very taken with that character. Wanted to know more about him. So that was really the inspiration for Sally Diamond.
And then you expanded on it. I mean, Sally had no filter. She sort of just said what she thought, what she thinks, and how do you?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't want to give her a diagnosis, so I was quite specific to say that she didn't have autism and she didn't have Asperger's because her behavior is so contradictory. It's not that she always hates music or hates loud noises, like she selectively does. And she's not without her flaws. She can be violent when she feels threatened, but it's all explained by her. When you read into the story and you find out what her background was, it's all explained by the circumstances of her early childhood, which she doesn't remember, fortunately for her.
So how did you gravitate to this genre of dark thrillers? How do you get
It's
that?
funny.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to follow up. Go ahead. I'll answer that.
Okay, I'll answer that bit first. The funny thing is, I never thought of the genre. When I started writing my first book, genre didn't cross my mind. I didn't know what I was writing. And, when you read out the introduction, um, my first book won Crime Novel of the Year award. That was the first time I heard that I was a crime novelist, because I just thought I'd written a book. I didn't recognize it as crime because none of my books have detectives or car chases or you know um private investigators or anything. And I thought those were crime novels. I didn't really realize that there was such a thing as a psychological thriller. I didn't know that that was a genre. But it came around the same time, it was published around the same time as Girl on a Train and Gone Girl. So I think I wrote in quite nicely on the coattails of those books, which were also, I think the best descriptor is domestic noir, because they're all very dark stories that happen around the home and within the family a lot of the time. So yeah, I think domestic noir is a good descriptor.
Is it hard to get into the head like of a Sally Diamond to write that story?
Well, Sally Diamond is like most of the other characters that I've written have been psychopathic, like really, really severely damaged, and they are the bad guys. In this case, Sally is the victim of the crime, and she can say things straight out that nobody else can, but she's far closer to me than any of my other characters. Like, you know, her fear of shopping malls is I share that fear. And you know, small talk, you know, I'm not a great one for small talk. And um her, you know, um uh not wanting to get into conversations. Now, this sounds terrible because I do love meeting readers at events and things, but she doesn't like crowds and loud music, combination of crowds and loud music, and that would be me. I never liked going to clubs or anything when I was young. I always hated them. Give me a quiet pub, quiet bar somewhere, and I'm fine, or a little cafe. But I never liked going clubbing.
So did you know the whole story before you started to write it, or as you go along, you make up things
Yeah, I
to
make it up as I go along. I literally started with the first line, and then I thought, first line is put me out with the bins. And then I thought, okay, who said that? And then put me out with the bins, he said. And the first point of view is this man's daughter. And then I thought, ooh, imagine if somebody did put somebody out with the bins, because it's a conversation I often have had with my husband because he we were having a conversation ages ago about, you know, what we're gonna do when we die. And, you know, he wants his ashes to be scattered across a mountain range in the west of Ireland. And I thought, you know, giving given the, you know, life expectancy at the moment, you know, I'm likely to be in my 80s or 90s when my husband dies. And I think it's very selfish of him to expect me to go across a mountain range with his ashes when I'm that age. So I said, I'm going to make it real simple for you. You can just put me out with the trash. So that's how the story opens. And then I thought, okay, now what kind of person would put somebody out with the trash? So I invented Sally popped up as somebody who in the beginning was just neurodivergent. She was just a bit odd. And I remember when I was in school, you know, I'm 57 now, so it's a long time ago. But when I was in school, there were kids who probably were autistic and had Asperger's, but we didn't have those labels then. So they were just a bit odd, and they were some might have been kind of antisocial um or would be very, you know, excited by one topic and one topic only, or would only read one book but reread that book incessantly or stuff like that. And I just kind of thought, I want to make one of those people the center of a book. I thought it would be nice to kind of pay homage to those people because they were odd, but they weren't bad. You know, they were kind of referred to as weird, but they weren't. They were just in their own worlds, and I was kind of drawn to those people, and yeah, still friends with a lot of them.
so when Sally took it literally to put her father, put the ashes in the trash, would you take it literally? Is that something that your husband would do, what you would do? That you're going to take this, I mean, it's funny. It was like, what is she doing?
I know. No, it's not legal here, so you can't
It's
do it.
not legal here
I
either.
don't, I know it's not legal anywhere. No, it's only a joke. It's only a joke.
I know, but
So that's the whole thing about Sally. She takes it seriously because, she doesn't, and her father should have known. He's lived with her her whole life. He should
yeah.
have known um, she doesn't pick up on cues, but he has left written instructions for her detailing exactly how he wants his funeral to go, but she just hasn't opened that envelope
Didn't
yet.
open the letter, right?
Yeah.
So do you talk to psychologists or do you read a lot of psychology books? How'd you learn of the Stockholm syndrome? Like, how'd you do your research?
I didn't do any research until the very end, and then I sent it to a psychiatrist friend of mine, and I asked her to read it, and so she she read it and she thought it was okay. There was a couple of wordings. I called her kind of mentally deficient, and she said, no, that's not a term that would ever be used. Like even in the 80s, when, Sally's discovered with her mother in this appalling state, she said that's not a term that would ever be used. So I think I used the word socially deficient or socially deprived. So it's her ability to interact with other people. That's the biggest problem for her. And it's caused her to be so isolated. And the book was written in lockdown. So I was feeling very socially isolated. So I ended up writing these really socially isolated characters. Peter is also very socially isolated, not by force, but by betrayal by his father.
So the book is packed with a lot of suspense. It's very tense, and there's a lot of twists. How do you do it? How do you structure the story like that? And I mean, once I started this book, I couldn't stop. I think I read it in 2 days. I couldn't stop it.
Oh, thank you. I think when I come up to the end of a piece I'm doing and I look at, okay, what's the obvious thing that would happen next? Um, I find a way for that obvious thing not to be possible. So if I can't predict what's going to happen next, then neither should my reader. So I like to surprise myself when I'm writing as well. So yeah, I'd always try and turn things a little bit. It's like for example, when Peter's father dies in that car crash, Sally's father as well. When he dies in that car crash, you expect now, here comes a spoiler, a big spoiler. If you haven't read it, I presume you all have. But you expect that he will go and set Lindy free, but no, he doesn't. And then you begin to think of Peter in a completely different way, because up to that point, he was a victim very much of his father and his father's lies and manipulations. But then you realize, oh my God, this kid has had no other example to follow. Like he had a friend for a couple of months, the little Maori boy, the New Zealand boy, and he drowned because of the lies that Peter's father told him. He thought that he would die if he helped him, if he rescued him.
Right.
Um, so it's his fault. He has that guilt to live with then for the rest of his life when he realizes that that was a lie. But at the end of the day, he's his father's son. He has no other example of how to be a father or how to have any relationship except to keep the girl locked up.
So do you think there's any hope for people that have these traumatic histories that they can live normal lives? I mean,
I
know
think
what to do.
it depends on how they're treated. It depends on their surroundings and who is in their lives. Sally could, even at the end of the book, when it looks very bleak for Sally, I don't believe for a second that Sally's community will let her go back to her old ways. She smashed her piano, but you know, there's no way. I would say by the end of the pandemic, Sally has bought a violin online. She's taught herself to play it. She's a brilliant violinist. And, you know, I'd say in 2025, she's teaching all the local children how to play the violin. So we don't have to worry about Sally. You know, Sally's going to be fine. But Peter is a different kettle of fish. I don't know. I don't like to think about what Peter's doing and where he's doing it. But I do know that he won't have kidnapped a child. The one saving grace he has is that he's not a pedophile. So if he's kidnapped somebody, it'll be an adult. That's not that's not a great recommendation for somebody.
No, it's actually sad. It's sad, you know?
Yeah.
So Sally's upbringing was interesting also. She was given drugs a year after her trauma. Why do you think that her adoptive parents kept that from her? You know, didn't drugged her and didn't want to tell her what happened? What was the
I think I kind of put myself and I thought to myself, if I was a psychiatrist and I had this case in front of me and the mother has died, taken her own life, and I am left with this 5, 6 year old child and who is now extremely traumatized without her mother, who has been through something horrific and is now without her only point of contact. If I could find a way to take those memories away from her, would I do it? And I thought, yeah, I would. Now, I don't know whether that's ethically correct or whether it's even possible to do that, but I just kind of thought, well, I'm I'm the writer, so I get to decide. So I just thought, yeah, that's what I'd do if I was Tom Diamond, that's what I'd do. So he kind of sedates her, kind of mildly sedates her. So and then he weans her off those drugs very slowly over the course of a year or so. So her first memory is her 7th birthday party. But because she grows up like that, she thinks that everybody's first memory is around 7. She doesn't realize that other people's memories don't go back any further than that. So she doesn't realize, but the only life she knows is with Tom and his wife, whose name I can't remember. So long since I wrote that book. Um, I can't remember his wife's name. But she was a good doctor because she wanted more for Sally than Tom did. She wanted Sally to go to college. She wanted Sally to have a normal life. She wanted her to interact. But Tom saw her as a case study rather than a daughter. Like he did love her, but at the same time he wanted to keep her to study her. So it was very important to him that he could monitor every part of her life. And that's why when he dies, she finds all these files and files and files about her kind of nutrition, her mood, her physical, abilities and how she grows up. And he's like interviewed her time and time again over the course of years. She's been his life's work. Whereas his wife treated her more as a daughter than a case study. So she's kind of been unlucky with two fathers.
you
Although
know,
Tom did love her.
right? At least they were sort of kind. They were kind to her, the adoptive parents.
They were. They were. I
When
mean,
does when does one's childhood memory actually start? You know, I mean, when early on you don't remember things anyway. Does she remember when she was kept in captivity like that?
I think if she hadn't been drugged, she probably would have some
Before
terrors.
7, right? But at 3
Yeah.
or 2, and you have no memory of what happens.
I remember being in my cot. I remember getting a beaker, what you call a sippy cup,
Yes,
um, in my cot with the bars on it, I know a cot there's a different word in America for a baby's cot.
that's a sippy cup. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but there's a different word for the cot bed with the cot with the bars on it. that you're in when you're a baby. What's that called in
Crib?
America? Crib? Yeah, I remember being in my crib and with my sippy cup. So maybe 1.5. I remember being that age. Yeah. Um, but I think with Sally, she would remember, she'd certainly remember her mother. So, and she would remember her time in the psychiatric institution, even if she didn't remember stuff before that, because, she was rescued when she was 5, and then she was adopted when she was 6. And so she spent a year in that institution with her mother. And then when she was 6, she was adopted by the Diamonds. And then 7, she was kind of reawakened. So I think she would definitely remember her mother. So her mother's death would be a huge trauma for her.
Right.
Yeah. So I just made it up. I didn't.
It's unbelievable to make this story up. Like I said to myself, I can't wait to meet this author. I can't I even fathom what she based this on. And it's just an
You
imagination.
see, it's based on so many things. Like I read Room, and I've read
Yes.
those stories like the Duggards, that family that were kept in
Uh-huh.
captivity, and there was a famous case in Austria, was it, or Belgium, of Natasha Kampuschki or something like that, and that she was held. And I was fascinated by those cases, but and some of those um women who were kidnapped have gone on to write books, but none of the children have, the
Right.
children of those relationships. And I was really interested to wonder what happens to those kids and how do they adapt to normal life? Like one of those kids was like 15 or something when the family were rescued. And you just kind of wonder, like the other thing about Sally is she has inherited like Sally's um violent outbursts. Does she has she inherited the violence from her father, or is it or is her violence just a reaction to threat that she remembers subconsciously from when she was a kid? Certainly her piano playing is inherited from her birth father. But she doesn't know that. And when she finds that out, it destroys it for her. That's such a horrible thing for her to know that she has inherited something from her father. But because she has no recollection of him, she doesn't know what he was like. And well, she knows what he was like, she knows what he did, but she doesn't know what his day to day was. And Peter's experience of the same man was so different, so very different. Like he was quite a caring father and an indulgent father to Peter because he was a boy, but he just was such a misogynist that he couldn't countenance having a woman in his life unless it was to use and abuse her.
I can't imagine what happened in his family. You talk about nature versus nurture. Like the
There's
father.
a little hint, there's a tiny little hint. There's one line when his sister, Conor Gary's sister, who has lived away in Australia, and she comes back and she says that when her father died, her mother expected Conor, who's the horrible pedophiliac abuser, she expected her father to fulfill his role in every way. Don't really want to go any further into that. No.
And I
And
guess
I didn't want to write any part of the story from Connor's point of view because I didn't want to be in his mind for a second. Not for a second.
that was a good thing. So the teddy bear, can you talk about the symbolism with that represented throughout the whole through the different stages of the novel?
It's funny, the teddy bear is something that like all of my books, all of my books have some element of characters, adult characters who have had damaged childhoods. And for every single one of them, I have this very specific photograph of a very damaged teddy bear by a photographer called Matt Nixon. And I've had that photograph on my desktop for, since I wrote my first book. And I always wanted it to be on the cover of a book. But every single time the publisher said no, they didn't want it on the cover. So when I was writing Sally Diamond, I said, right, this time I'm going to put the teddy bear in. So they have to put the damn teddy bear on the damn cover. And they didn't. Again, they said no. I think it's on the Bulgarian cover and the Swedish cover. Is it on the Swedish cover? Or maybe that's a doll. I can't remember. But yeah, the bear signifies, now, like when you see a really damaged teddy bear, and in fact the photograph that I'm talking about was part of a series called Much Loved, and the teddy bear was so damaged because it was so loved and it was taken and dragged everywhere. But like a damaged teddy bear, to the publishers, they thought it would be too off-putting because it suggests a damaged childhood. But that's what we're talking about in this case. You know, we are talking about a damaged childhood for both children. And yeah, so I kind of wanted it to be a kind of a sinister thing that happens. But then in the end, when we realize that Peter has sent the teddy bear to his daughter, Amanda, in the last chapter, and she has it sitting up on her piano, that it suddenly the kind of the sinister aspect of the teddy bear is gone, because Amanda has chosen, like, she's the hope for the future, because she has chosen to turn her back on this horrible story and not to have any association with it. She has chosen not to be part of this awful story of kidnap and pedophilia and abuse and all of that. She has made that choice to go forward in her life without any of that baggage. So having the teddy bear for her, she thinks it's just been sent to her by a fan. And she thinks it's a funny little thing because it's obviously not new, and it's a curious little thing, but she has it sitting up at her piano, which is kind of a nice thing. So it takes all the trauma and the horror out of the teddy bear for her. But we know, the reader knows.
So you mentioned about the teddy bear on one part of the that it was on a different cover than the United States, and I had read that the UK version of your book is different than the US version of your book. The end.
Only in one aspect. You know, the letter that Angela writes at the end, where she says, you know, we're not going to let you go back to your isolated ways, and your friends are real worried about you, and we're all going to meet on Saturday, and we're going to go down to the park, and we're going to have a picnic or whatever. That is not in the UK version. That's really the only difference.
And why? Which one? Because you wrote the UK version first, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
why was the US changed?
my American editor wanted there to be more hope for Sally at the end of the book. So you see it in the UK version, we leave Sally in devastation. She's utterly devastated. She can trust nobody. She's smashed her piano. She has no contact with any of her friends. She's blocked. She doesn't answer her phone. She doesn't answer the door. And she's very much very isolated and right back to where she was at the very beginning of the book, but without her father and without her piano. So it's a really bleak ending for Sally. And so when I wrote when my American editor asked me, to write something that shows some hope for Sally, I went to my UK editor and I said, look, the Americans are going with this. Would you like this? And they said no. They preferred the devastating ending. So yeah, I guess American readers are a bit softer than the UK readers and the Irish readers. Yeah, so yeah, it didn't, it was, 2 pages. It wasn't a huge deal for me to write it, and I didn't mind doing it. And the feedback's been good on both sides of the Atlantic, so I don't mind.
So interesting that the difference. What about the title of the book and the cover of the book? Are they the same in the different?
No, they're quite different. The UK cover is very different, but like it's I think it's been translated. I've got 36 translation deals, so it's been published in 36 territories. Like even though it's Spanish in Argentina and Spanish in Chile, there's still different editions. And like it's Portuguese in Brazil and Portuguese in Portugal, but they're different publishers. So it's 36 translations altogether. And I think about 60% of them went with the UK cover, and the others are all completely different. And the American one is completely different. I like them both, I have to say. But the title, funny enough, when I came to choosing a title, I wanted her name to be in the title, so I needed a really strong name. Like I just called her Mary Murphy, when I was writing it. But I wanted a really catchy sort of name, and it was only when I was when I was writing in my own office at home, I was looking a lot across in the bookshelves, and I was kind of looking at titles of books, and I was and then I came across a whole row of Lisa Jewells. I'm a big Lisa Jewell fan, and I I kind of thought Lisa Jewell, that's a great name, and then I thought Jewel, Diamond, that'd be a good name. And then I thought Sally Diamond. So well, I didn't meet Lisa Jewell. I'd never met her until um, later in 2023. At the end of 2023, we were at a book festival together and we were on stage together in Scotland. So I got to tell her that, in front of a live audience. So it was great. Got a great reaction. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Lisa's, and now she's a big fan of mine. She's read all my books.
Yeah,
So
I like her
many
books
things.
too. They're good.
Thank you.
So you talked about the reactions that you've gotten, the responses and the reactions. Have they been good? You at the beginning of the interview, you said you were so afraid to release it and what was going to happen. Has the reviews been good consistently all over the world?
Yeah, funny enough, in territories that you wouldn't really like, it's very popular in Brazil and very popular in India. Go figure. Um, and it's yeah, it's done really. It was Barnes and Noble Thriller of the Month in August in America. It really kind of charted in the top 10 bestsellers in the UK for a good while. It did very well in Germany. I think Korea, it's doing well. Some of the territories it hasn't been published yet, but it's doing well in Sweden. Norway has published some of my backlist in a run-up to publishing Sally Diamond. So yeah, and they're doing well there. So yeah, across the board, I haven't seen any negative commentary, although I don't know if the publishers would tell me if there was, but I haven't seen any negative reviews yet. Fingers crossed.
Is it hard to get it published in all these different countries? Is that challenging or is that common?
Well, I tell you one thing that was challenging about it was originally this book was 130,000 words long. And my agent said to me, you know that when foreign publishers look for a book and when they get the books translated, the translators are paid per word. So if you could just shave off 30,000 words, we'd have a much better chance of getting it translated. So I cut 30,000 words. So I cut, what's that, a quarter of the book or a fifth of the book? I'm useless at math, you know. Good thing I can write because I can't add or subtract. Yeah, so 30,000 words came off the book. So it's just over, I think it's 102,000 words altogether.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And because of that, all the foreign translations, they found it more, it meant it was easier for them to translate it because it was cheaper for them.
Interesting. Is that hard to do, to cut it like that when you have a story in your head?
Oh, it broke my heart. I had a scene where Sally was set up on a blind date by her friends, which ended in disaster. I had a scene where she goes for a job interview, also ends in disaster. I had a scene where when Peter comes back to Ireland, he goes and finds the house that he grew up in, and he breaks into the house. And yeah, and all of that had to go. But I kind of I have my fingers crossed that something's gonna come of this book for TV. And if it does, all of that can go back in. Because, you're gonna want a second series and maybe a third. And I'm sure the ending will be very different if it goes to TV, because I don't think I don't think you can have an ending like this for TV.
Do they want to do a TV movie or a TV series?
I think TV series. And then, I would probably write a sequel, and, I would have Amanda be bring her maybe to Ireland, or, have Sally maybe venture out of her village and maybe, um, I don't know. I think, if the TV thing comes off, yeah, I would be definitely writing a lot more. Whether I'd write it as a book or just for the TV, I don't know. That whole thing would have to be, um my agent would be all over that, so I don't know. But fingers crossed for me, because there's something that may be happening at the moment, but I've been down this road so often, like things have been optioned and let go so many times. Like everything gets optioned and nothing gets made. And
Wow.
when they get optioned, you're like, and I've had names thrown at me, like Leonardo DiCaprio is really interested in Unraveling Oliver, and his production company, or and you get really excited, and then you think, oh my God, Leonardo DiCaprio has read my book. And then you realize, no, he only owns the production company. And he's probably never even seen the book. Anyway, he's too busy with all those supermodels. When would he have time to read a book, for God's sake? So I don't know. I really don't know. But
So who would you want to play Sally if it ever happened?
oh gosh, well, if she's played by like if I kind of think that if it was made into a movie, they would probably, or made into a TV series for Netflix or HBO or whatever, that it would be, they would reset it in America because they wanted to appeal to a general audience. So it would be America. And if it was to be American actress, I'm just trying to think who's the right age. If it was Ireland, I would really love for Kerry Condon to play the part. She plays, any of you who've watched Better Call Saul, she plays Mike Ehrmantraut's daughter-in-law.
Oh, okay.
Um, and she's Irish, and she's wonderful. And she was in the Banshees of Inisherin, and she won Best Supporting Actress at the Globes last year, not this year, last year, for that role. And she's been in another big American series that I haven't watched, but Kerry Condon is her name. For an American actress, I'm just kind of think like who's around that early 40s mark. You see, by the time it gets made, you want to pick somebody who's like in their 30s now, because it takes so long for stuff to get made that, you know, by the time it's been through all the production stuff and all of the scripting stuff, it's going to be 2 or 3 years. So you want to pick somebody who's in their mid 30s now, so that maybe they could play 42, 41-year-old, 42-year-old by the time it gets to production.
So
So
before you came on, to everybody, you said that you wrote, TV shows, plays, novels. You've been in different you came to New York and worked in a show. Can you tell us what it's like from leaving that job to becoming a writer and why you did this?
well, when I worked in theater, when I worked on Broadway, I was a stage manager, so it was a completely different life. It was a different world, and I worked on a show called Riverdance, that toured all over America, and I did tour all over America and all over the world with that show. Um, but I was backstage, stage manager, never front of stage. I did train as an actor, but never had the nerve to go for an audition. But I loved theater. I loved plays particularly. So I worked as a stage manager in lots of theaters in Dublin. But then I worked in TV as a story associate. So I was kind of the administrative backup to the story writers. So I wasn't exactly getting to write the stories. I was in the beginning, and then there was a kind of change of regime, and the new executive producer said that I wasn't allowed to write stories anymore because I was a staff member and not a contracted writer, and I was taking work from the contracted writers. I'd been doing that for 8 years and nobody had complained. But anyway, that's a whole different ballgame. But so when when I went to write my own book, I couldn't believe how freeing it was to only be answerable to one person, and that's your editor. Because when you make TV, um, from the writer's point of view, and I wasn't a writer on that show, but from the writer's point of view, they have two script editors, they've got a story producer, they have an executive producer, they have actors, they have lighting people who might, really screw up and put the wrong character in the dark for a scene, or they might have, the sound people might, you know, like I've watched a lot of shows recently with subtitles, even though they're in English, and I don't know if it's my age or it's just actors mumbling, but there's a lot of stuff that's been ruined for me by mumbling actors. So, you can have your story ruined by so many things. There's so many people and there's so many layers of editorial that go from your laptop to the screen. There's just layers and layers to it. So I'm not sure that if it did get made into TV series that I'd want anything to do with it. Maybe not. Maybe not. It depends who the people are and how much I would get on with them. But I would like to write whatever we decide is the going forward story of Sally. I kind of would like to write that as a book, but we'll see. It's a long way off.
Well, we would definitely read it. I'm sort of done with my questions. I think there's some questions in the there's two questions in the chat. Let me see if we answered them. When you write, do you use pen and paper, a computer, or a combination of both?
Oh, laptop. And when I sign books now, I can barely write anything anymore because I'm so used. I write, if I'm away from my laptop and I have an idea for the book, I type it into my phone. Yeah, and everybody of my generation and younger, our handwriting or penmanship, as you call it, is gone to pot because none of us can write a sentence anymore because we're all so used to keyboards and on our phones and our laptops. We can't really write anything. We're terrible.
That is true. Does anybody have any questions? What do you think is Peter's future? Diane Cena asked.
I hope he's caught. I hope he gets caught. And I hope he gets caught before he kidnaps somebody else.
Eileen Bauman said there was a novel, The Collector, that reminded me that this reminded me of. Did you ever read that?
Yeah, The Collector by John Fowles. Yes, I did read that. And yeah, the John Fowles kidnapper, it was the same kind of thing, a kidnapper who kidnapped a girl, but he's a collector in the way that somebody collects butterflies. He just wanted her to be his friend, not to be he wasn't a sexual predator. He didn't want to rape her, but he just wanted her to be his friend. And it's funny because she's not an altogether likable character. She's quite a snob, and I think she's, I may have this wrong, but I think she's kind of an Oxbridge student, and he's from a very kind of poor working class background, but his family have won the lottery. And so he sent his sister and his aunt off to Australia, and he's built this dungeon in the basement of his house where he captured this girl and locks her away and tries to be friends with her. But he's so weird and creepy. He's really creepy. He's really weird and creepy. Whereas Peter, actually, he's not altogether creepy, because, you know, in the end, Stockholm Syndrome, Lindy does fall in love with him because he never abuses her and he never forces himself on her, you know, and he is her only friend, her only ally, and he feeds her and he's kind to her and he gets her stuff that she wants and nice clothing and all of the stuff. Like, he does seduce her very slowly over the course of a couple of years. So, you know, he does try and befriend her and it does work. But in The Collector, yeah, The Collector was definitely an inspiration for this book too. Well spotted.
Was the book Room based on a true story, or that was all fictional? Do you
That's
know?
fictional.
There was
That's
nothing.
fiction.
I don't know why I thought there was some truth based to that. That's
Well, they're all
yeah.
based on, there's lots of similar stories out there, you know, the there's the Dugard family
Yes.
in America and the Fritzl case in Austria, and there was another one in Germany. Um, like, we've never had one in Ireland that we know of, but who knows? Who knows? This could be somebody locked up right now somewhere, you know, not a million miles from where we're sitting now. We don't know. But please God, there isn't.
We just had a case in New York recently. I don't know if it was voluntarily or not, but they said there was a 14-year-old girl was taken by a 50-year-old man, and he was putting her on a boat, and they were going to North Carolina, and he had a captivity for, I don't know, 20 days. But
20 days.
20 days, but I don't know if she consented. They didn't say if she consented or it was against her will. But she was 14 years old, so I
No,
just
she's
read that in the
14-year-old. She doesn't have
Right,
she can't legally consent.
right. But
God,
I don't know the whole
gives me
story.
the shivers.
Yes. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Well, thank you. This was great. I couldn't wait to interview you. I just had to hear what you had to say about this book.
Thanks a million. I've really enjoyed the chat. I hope the readers did too.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Enjoy your workshop.
Oh, my retreat. Yeah.
Yeah.